Thank you everyone for joining today's Share Cafe ASX Hidden Gems webinar, where the Share Cafe team delve deep into the ASX to find genuine hidden gems to present to you each week. Safe to say, they've found some crackers for you today and some really exciting companies worth keeping an eye on. Presentations will come from Beston Global Food Company, Kingwest Resources Limited and Miramar Resources, three exciting companies. Each company will give a 10-minute presentation followed by 5 minutes of Q&A, and that's your chance to get involved. Once you've heard the companies present, think of the questions you would like to ask management. Submit them in writing using the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen, and I'll put your question to management after their presentation. Okay, let's get started. Let's hear from our first presenter, Ed Turner from Kingwest Resources Limited, ASX code KWR. An active explorer operating in the historic, prolific Northern Goldfields region of Western Australia. Ed, thanks for your time and over to you.
Thanks for the introduction, David. Next slide. The usual disclaimers, yep, thanks. On to corporate overview. We're quite a young company. We have only 243 million shares on issue, a current market cap of $16 million. Cash in hand at the end of the June quarter was $1.8 million, although we are in the process of an SPP currently, which will be finalised on the 1st of August, and that is to raise at least another $1.5 million, and we have very good support from that so far, so we're confident of raising that amount of money. Some options also on issue, 44 million. Major shareholder is Horizon Minerals. Horizon Minerals is the company that we acquired our two projects from 3 years ago. You can see board of directors there. It's a mix of technical and financial and business expertise, all very experienced people. I'm a geologist by training. Next slide, please. You can see the location of our two projects. So we've got the Menzies and the Glandor projects, both along strike from Kalgoorlie in the eastern goldfields. We have the Bardock tectonic zone running through both projects, or up to Menzies at least. And historically, that's been a great producer of gold mines. We have a lot of known deposits along strike to the south of us, as well down towards Kalgoorlie. Menzies is one of the major historic gold camps in the eastern goldfields. Gold was discovered there in 1896, and through to the Second World War, there was 650,000 ounces at 22 grams per tonne produced from underground mining. There hasn't been any underground mining since then. In the 90s, open pit mining started up and only ran for probably about 10 years there, when we produced another 150,000 ounces. So in total, 800,000 ounces at 19 grams per tonne has been produced. Nothing in the last 20 years. So you can see that's a very high grade production rate, and that's what really attracted us to the Menzies project. The Glandor project is very much a grassroots project. 80% of it's under salt lakes and hasn't been effectively explored until we got in there about a year ago and started drilling under the salt lakes. There's also gold outside of the salt lakes on dry land, but it's very grassroots and has very exciting potential for a major discovery. I should point out that at Menzies, all of our resources are in granted mining leases on the highway, on the railway line, and within trucking distance to numerous mills. So we don't need to prove up a plus million ounce deposit to justify building our own mill, when we can utilise other mills with toll treatment or some sort of joint venture arrangement. Next slide. So our strategic objectives for 2022, follow up our Sirloin gold discovery at Glandor. It has a Canal and Bell analogue based on its lithostructural setting. That's what attracted us to this conceptual target under the middle of the lake last year. We made a discovery less than 12 months ago. And with the air core drilling, 3 phases of air core drilling totaling 12,000 metres, we've proved up gold over a 2-kilometre strike length by 1 kilometre across strike, and it's open in all directions. That hadn't been drilled before, so divergent discovery. Now that we've discovered the gold in the air core drilling under the lake sediments, we've initiated diamond core drilling to really prove up what the deeper primary gold structural controls are. And our first program underway on the 4th hole, we've already hit 5 metres at 4.8 grams per tonne, including 2.3 metres at 9.4 grams per tonne. So that's very exciting early on in the program, and we're almost halfway through that program at present. At Gundari, also within the same tenement, but 2 tenements, we've got a lot of potential for nickel sulfide mineralisation in komatiite, like Glandor style. We've just done the first pass air core drilling and got some encouraging results, so we need to continue on and follow up that as well. Third part of our strategy is commercialising the mining opportunity at Menzies via some sort of mining agreement or joint venture arrangement or asset sales. We've just signed a first mining agreement to restart mining at Selkirk, which is just one of the resources at Menzies. And ultimately, we want to continue to grow the Menzies gold resources, particularly at depth. We know there's a lot of high-grade potential there. You can see from the historic production, Lady Shetland, for example, produced 191,000 ounces at 32 grams per tonne. So currently, all the resources are limited by the depth of the drilling. So there's a lot more potential to grow those resources in time. Next slide. So Gundari, this has been our focus for the last 12 months. It's taken up most of our time and effort. You can see there what we call the Sir Lawrence Gold Discovery, and like I mentioned, about 2 kilometres long. That oval shape is just to give you a basic idea of the size. That we do have mineralisation outside of that. All of those dots are colour-coded to the maximum gold value in the air core drill holes, projected to surface. So that was really just to narrow down where we need to target the deeper drilling. But the attraction for us was knowing the conglomerate unit, the host rock, and those D4 faults. There's also D3 faults going north, east, southwest, intersecting in there. It's an unusual concentration of so many faults, and so that means that the potential for a very large plumbing system for the gold fluids to come up as the potential for very large gold deposits within this area. And we found mineralisation on every line that we drilled. Next slide. Now this is zooming in on the same area, but from all of that air core drilling, that's really just telling us that there's gold there. Then we had to figure out within that larger area where we wanted to target the diamond drilling. So we've identified 9 priority targets and listed there. You can see, and the 4 drill holes that we've completed and received assays for are the black line traces there in target 1, mostly in target 3. Hole number 4 is the one where we intersected the 2.3 metres at 9.4 within the wider intersection there. You can see a photo of the core there and the quartz vein. So that's highly encouraging. Now we need to test all of these targets ultimately, but we will need to come back to this one and drill underneath this hole and along strike. We believe it's striking southwest to northeast. So we'll get back there soon. But currently we're drilling target 2 and we've just finished a hole on target 8. So we've got a lot more, at least another 3,000 metres in the current program, but if we keep on intersecting gold, we'll just keep on expanding the program. Next slide. I mentioned the nickel potential. On here you can see in purple the highway ultramafic unit running for about 11 kilometres within our tenement package there. You've got the Sir Lawrence gold discovery there for scale. So it's just the east there and a different sequence of rocks. It has produced gold in the past at the Scotia mine, which Western Mining mine in the 1969 through to 1977. High grade nickel sulfide. So it's a very attractive target area, quite a large target area. You've also got ore minerals right with the Saints deposit discovery right on our southern border. So the same sequence of rocks running through there. So initially we just drilled 8,000 metres of air core to really narrow down the focus because we were just based on aeromagnetics before that to get us in the proximate area. and we're very encouraged by the results we got there. Multiple intersections in good location. We found that the Mardiite unit is often folded as well, refolded and thrust, so it's actually wider in places than we anticipated. So now we need to follow up with electromagnetic survey to look for the conductors and potentially some RC drilling in that part of the lake. It's easy to access and drier and shallower too, so we can get a larger drill rig, unlike the diamond rig, onto those. Next slide. So this is just the northern area. We ended up identifying two areas. In the southern area is 1.7 kilometre strike length of interest, and this northern area it's over 2.5 kilometres, as you can see there, and some of the intersections are highlighted once again within the purple unit, which is the highway ultramafic. So that's highly encouraging. These are not nickel laterite. These are definitely in bedrock, in a semi-fresh material at the base of the air core holes. So those grades are not economic, but they indicate that we're proximal to, potentially proximal to economic grade nickel sulfide mineralisation. So those are the areas we need to target with electromagnetic surveys in the near future. Next slide. Now, also we recognise that this has good gold potential based on the rocks and the number of faults and the structural setting, particularly in that northern area there. So we assayed for gold in the same drill holes, and you can see once again in bedrock, 4 metres at 1.3, 16 within 16 metres at 0.7. That's just an example. There's multiple significant intersections with air core. Anything over about 0.1 grams per tonne is significant, because you're only really just penetrating the bedrock. If it was lateritic, that'd be a different story. But all the laterite has been stripped away from this area. So we're going from the lake sediments into semi-fresh material and then ending in the fresh rock. So that's highly encouraging. We need to follow these intersections up as well, either with more air core initially or with RC drilling, which is probably the next move there. Next slide. Now on to Menzies. When we bought the project 3 years ago, we had a JORC resource of approximately 170,000 ounces. Now we've done a lot of drilling since then and proved up the JORC resources now to over 500,000 ounces at 1.33 grams per tonne. You can see they all lie within a corridor there and over 16 kilometres long. Some of that in between Lady Irene and Selkirk hasn't been tested at all. It's under quite a lot of cover, some ALN sand cover. But most of the mineralisation is within the Lady Shenton system. About 60% of our total resources in the centre there, right next to Menzies. Selkirk is quite a small deposit, but that's the one I mentioned. We've just signed a mining agreement with BML Ventures from Kalgoorlie to do a cutback of that small pit, basically, and that's planned to be back in production by the end of the year. And we're working on the best ways to commercialise the remaining resources. As mentioned, all the resources are limited by the depth of the drilling. You can see there on the left. So there's a lot of potential to, double or even triple these resources in time with deeper drilling. Next slide. There's a summary table of our resources. These are all open pittable resources. So almost all of it's just using a 0.5 grams per tonne cutoff, except Untitled does include a small portion of 2 grams per tonne, which would be at the base of any open pit. So it's just open pittable resources. I mentioned Lady Shenton system, which includes Pericles and Sterling. Sterling was a discovery by us when we were doing some drilling at Lady Shenton. Pericles hasn't been mined at all from surface, so Pericles and Sterling basically would be new pits, and Lady Shenton pit, you can see that the red shape is basically the resource projected to surface. So we'd end up with one very large pit or 2 pits, with Sterling being a separate one. So there's a lot of potential to, as I mentioned, to grow these resources, but we'd really like to get this back into production in the near term. Next slide. Now, we also recognise that at Untitled, this is probably better off being an underground mine rather than a cutback of the pit. This is the deepest pit, about 120 vertical meters in the north end, which is the brown shape. We did some underground resources, basically looking at plus 2 grams per tonne, plus 3 grams per tonne cut-off. That's the pink shapes there, you can see. Once again, limited by drilling. We stopped drilling because just getting a bit, well, not too expensive, but we weren't getting the return recognition in the marketplace for adding to these resources. So there's a lot of potential to keep on growing those resources at depth. We're probably better off putting a decline off the end of the pit there and going straight into the ore body and get the restart underground mining and then drill it out from underground. Now the yellow shape is a historic mine. So the Princess May chute went down to 600 vertical meters. So we know these resources have deep roots and it's still going. We have drilled underneath that and proven that there's still gold going down to 700 meters. A lot of that's been stoped out, but that just gives you an indication of the potential for these chutes to continue at depth and really need to be just drilled more. So using a 3 gram cutoff, we have 59,000 ounces at 4.56 grams per tonne. So this is quite high grade and we'll be able to truck that quite a long distance to mills. So there's a lot of potential ways we could skin this cat basically. And that's the last slide, David.
Thanks, Ed. Great presentation and clearly a very interesting project that investors and others should be watching. For the benefit of those watching online, can you explain the importance of being on a granted ML versus being on an exploration license or other form of license?
Yeah, well, that'll save us at least a year of getting into production. So if it's already granted, we don't have to go through that process again, particularly with the mines department being snowed under right now. We still need the engineering, the plan, the mine plan to be approved and environmental permits, but basically it just really speeds up the whole process and it means we can get into production in less than 12 months rather than 2 to 3 years.
Now, whenever anyone talks about Kalgoorlie and areas north of Kalgoorlie and prolific gold producing areas such as Kalgoorlie and the goldfields, and I'll probably ask Allan the same question, they assume that everything's been explored, everything's been found and there's nothing left. How do you, first of all, how do you get your hands on something as exciting as this? But how do you apply modern technologies and modern techniques, and what advantage is that giving you beyond what was even occurring 10 or 15 years ago?
Yeah, well, all the easy stuff's been found, that's for sure, and we have to go further afield and under salt lakes and more remote areas, but also at depth. Previous drilling was quite limited, like for example in our deep drilling. This Menzies project, we only had 20 holes which were drilled to 200 meters depth over the entire project area. Nowadays, with the drill rigs are much better. They have much larger capacity. So the RC rigs, for example, can easily drill down to 400 meters, and the diamond rigs can go, thousands of meters. So that sort of things have improved a lot and continue to improve. And the drilling companies we have in WA are world leading, so that really helps them. They build their own rigs. Also, the geophysical techniques have improved. Now help us much more with defining the structural targets, and not just with the magnetics, but with gravity and other methods like that. So we can test more conceptual targets under covered areas. So if it's covered by sand or covered by a salt lake, and that we can test those with more confidence than they could 20 years ago.
And like you say, even though 20 years ago wasn't the old timers, but the easy stuff was found. But what we're seeing more and more now is even things that historically would have been walked over and walked past are now yielding significant ore bodies.
Yeah, part of it's also the exploration or the prospecting goes in phases. When gold prices are up, we can probably fund and do appropriate exploration. When prices are down, we have to be very selective, and we can't do half as much as we would like. And that's been part of the reason for some really good discoveries, very good discoveries in Western Australia, not just in gold in recent years, but it's because the geologists have finally had enough money to do more effective exploration and not stop after getting a few discouraging results. So these things can take years to unfold, and that's normal. Finding stuff in the first 6 months of an exploration program is very, very unusual.
And talking about activity and being busy, you guys are clearly active and busy and have defined ore bodies. So are your neighbours, and everyone's busy around you. And how much do you learn from each other? But also, how much do they watch what you're doing with an eye on, potentially aggregating or bringing things together?
Yeah, everyone's watching everyone else. Don't worry about that. And even conferences like Diggers and Dealers, it's great. You can go and talk with all the other parties, all the neighbours, not just the neighbours, but to see what they're doing and how they're progressing. And if someone makes some sort of breakthrough from an exploration technique, or figures out something new, that becomes reasonably public fairly soon. And we learn from each other, and that's good. And we'd like to see other companies in the neighbourhood be successful, because that does mean that mergers and acquisitions are more likely, and ultimately that benefits the shareholders, which is our main game. Our main aim is to reward the shareholders. So that gives us other options, rather than every company trying to build their own mill and go into production, which doesn't make economic sense. It's good for the whole neighbourhood to be having some success, basically.
And a final question here from maybe a shareholder, but certainly someone very interested in the Kingwest story. Can you explain the similarities between Sir Lawrence and the Kanowna Belle geologically? Yeah,
the similarities, as we currently, and so far the model stands, is based on the lithostructural settings, which basically means the lithologies or the rock types are similar or almost the same. Particularly the conglomerate unit, and the structural settings is not just a typical shear zone, north-south shear zone. We have those D4, D3 structures, so northeast, southwest, intersecting the northwest, southeast structures. And where you get those intersections, that's where you get most of the gold falling out. So you need that structural trap basically for large gold deposits. And at Kanowna Belle, they have the same structural setting.
Brilliant. Ed, thanks for a great presentation. Kingwest Resources Limited, stock code KWR, clearly a company to watch. A hidden gem's been uncovered. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, David.
Our next presentation comes from Fabrizio Jorge from Beston Global Food Company, ASX code BFC, an Australian-based supplier of clean, healthy protein products to the world's growing consumer markets, particularly Asia. Looking forward to hearing more about this hidden gem. Over to you, Fabrizio.
Well, thank you very much, David, and a pleasure to be here today with your audience and talking a bit more about Beston Global Foods. Next slide, please. Beston Global Foods is a relatively young company. We have been created back in 2012. We are celebrating this year our 10-year journey, and what a journey it has been. We started very much the company, which is based out of South Australia in Adelaide, with a vision of taking to the world, the world's best food and the best dairy type of products, the best protein type of products coming out of dairy, as well as our meat business. The business started very much with the acquisition of 2 manufacturing facilities from Murray Goulburn. You remember the largest dairy cooperative in Australia. Back in 2012, and since then there has been we divide the company into 2 phases initially, which was largely the rebuild phase in phase 1, where we had to actually take the manufacturing facilities back to a global standard, not only from a manufacturing quality point of view, but also from the point of view of reliability. And we brought into those sites probably the best technology that is available in the world. We brought the best Italian machines for manufacturing mozzarella, for example. And we also brought a very unique technology in terms of extracting a bioactive ingredient out of raw milk called lactoferrin. And throughout this phase one has been really to build up that technology and that capability. Phase two for us has been largely to build our supply capabilities throughout the state of South Australia, something that we are incredibly proud of. We started with very humble beginnings of only collecting approximately 15 million liters of milk from dairy farmers throughout the state of South Australia, to now being consolidated largely as the biggest processor of dairy in the state, where we are processing approximately 30 to 35% of what the state produces in terms of dairy, and not only selling that domestically, but also exporting to multiple parts of the world. And we're now embarking on an exciting, what we feel, which is a phase three of the company, which is all about consolidating our growth, and also what we describe as valorizing our portfolio in the best way possible, effectively being very selective about the markets, the clients, and the channels that we would be operating on. So phase three for us is where the opportunity for our shareholders to start capitalizing from the investment at Beston starts to take place. Next slide, please. We have been, as I mentioned, throughout the phase two, 1 and 2, very much focused on the growth. We have been recognized as one of the fastest growing food companies across Asia Pacific, with a year-on-year growth revenues almost by 111%. Again, being very successful around the recruitment of dairy farmers. And I'm incredibly proud of the equity that Beston has with our dairy farming families. We went through probably now the last month or so through what I would describe probably the most competitive dairy recruitment season that I've been seeing in my career, in my 27-year career in dairy. And clearly we came out incredibly strong. And actually just today we have issued a business trading update to our shareholders and investors, indicating that we have been able to secure our milk for next season. And again, we are very well placed to confirm our guidance for the next 12 months. We mentioned about building capability. One product that we're incredibly proud of is our mozzarella. Just about 2 months ago, we have been recognized by the Dairy Industry Association in Australia, which is a national body, as producing the best quality mozzarella in the country. An award that was very close to the hearts of our people in J Voice, simply because we have been focused on almost tripling our output of mozzarella, again, coming from 4,000 tons back in 2019 to now close to 16,000 tons last financial year. So, and this is a product, again, exported to multiple clients and channels and markets around the world. We received 161 major industry awards recognizing the quality of our products, largely all types of cheeses that we make. We're very proud of, again, of the type of cheddars that we're making, the mozzarellas, the parmesans, the gruyères, very, very high quality type of cheeses, and something that, again, very recognized by the industry. I mentioned about the acquisition of our nutraceutical plant and the ability to extract these, what we call the pink gold out of milk, which is, again, a bioactive ingredient called lactoferrin. Lactoferrin is an ingredient largely used by food companies to claim immunity properties on their labels. For example, lactoferrin is widely used across the infant formula industry, especially in markets like China. It is something now in our trading update today, something that we also revalidated very successfully, the fact that we have now sold largely our entire production of lactoferrin for the F23 season, which is about 60 metric tons of products. Beston is now recognized as one of the largest lactoferrin producers in the Southern Hemispheres, and we are accounting of approximately 5% of the world's production of lactoferrin today. So we'll continue to accelerate growth on that important part of the company. Next slide, please. Going to that phase 3, which is again the valorization of our portfolio and making sure that the company does deliver against its profit targets after that significant growth journey that we have been having. In terms of milk supply, as I mentioned, we are securing about 30% of the entire South Australian milk, and we are targeting further growth. In our update today, we are indicating that for the F23 season, we have signed up approximately over 155 million litres. So we are ahead of where we landed in F22. And we are giving an update about our sales pipeline. We have much more demand what we can produce today. Again, a huge testament about the high quality products that I was referring early on, and a huge testament about the performance of our 3 manufacturing facilities. We are running our facilities with very, very high utilization. One of our sites, probably our largest manufacturing facility, which is the Jervois facility, is now running about 90% utilization, with again a very stable plant and yield being achieved across the entire portfolio. And the portfolio here is not only mozzarella, but we are also producing whey proteins as a byproduct of producing cheese, and we are also producing cream cheese and butter type of products. We are focusing on product mix again. In the dairy universe, different types of product streams, they do valorize differently. For example, cheese prices, they have a tendency of being a little bit more stable than milk powders, for example. So we are taking a very proactive stance on making sure that we extract the maximum value possible on every bucket of milk that we are collecting from our farmers. And then finally, a bit of an update on that dairy nutraceuticals part of our business, which again, something we're very proud of, that we are now not only selling to leading Australian food companies, but also make an important inroad into the nutraceutical marketplace in countries like South Korea, India. We starting a relationship with a large nutraceutical enterprise in the US, and also Eastern and Western Europe. Countries like Italy and Poland are starting to import the product from us. Next slide, please. In terms of our strategy, we have effectively in the company 2 large business units. One is our food and beverages business unit, focus on our retail, food services, and also export business. Largely focus again on the everyday dairy. These are the cheeses, for example. These are the butters, the creams, the cream cheeses, what we described as everyday dairy. And on the other side, we have the bioactive business unit, which is recognize the complexity about the functional nutrition that lactoferrin as an ingredient brings to our clients. And this is a far more specialized business unit that talks about clinical research, marketing, and so forth. And this is underpinned by obviously our operations excellence focus and our sustainability excellence focus in terms of especially reducing our carbon footprint throughout the dairy supply chain across South Australia. We do believe that being the largest processor of dairy in the state, we have a very big social responsibility around making sure that the carbon footprint is obviously mitigated. So we do have a plan in the company to totally decarbonize our supply chains, and also even regenerate some of the native bush that our farmers are embarking with us. Very innovative as well. We do have a trialing program around methane emission reduction, with which, as you know, methane is generated by the cows producing dairy, producing milk, and by change on their diets, we are in a position to mitigate that, and we are creating some very exciting partnerships on that area, and really pioneer in that space in our state. Next slide, please. Our business in a nutshell, our dairy business accounts by about 90% of our group's revenue, and we also have a meat company in the state of Victoria, where we are processing meat into products like hamburgers, meatballs, sausages, and very soon we are also embarking into the plant-based protein space, a category that is growing almost exponentially around the world today. So we are it's something that we are very excited to also work on. The dairy portfolio, again, the main products, the main streams that we are working on, we continue to focus on our mozzarella business. The exciting part of mozzarella, and one thing that we are that differentiates Beston from other processors, is our ability to really tailor product specifications to the client. I'll give an example. The consumption of a pizza in a market like the Philippines is very different to a consumption of pizza in Australia. The Filipino consumer do appreciate a different type of stretching in that pizza. They appreciate a different type of blistering after the cooking process of the pizza. So being able to read those needs and being able to differentiate our products, it is something that is unique about our business. We also produce a very premium range of harder type of cheeses in our Murray Bridge site, where we are making cheddar type of products, parmesans, and we are also exporting even to places like Malta, a very unique type of cheese that we developed there. Lactoferrin, as I mentioned, one thing that is I'm very proud to update the market even today was that our initial view is that we would sell only 10 metric tons of lactoferrin. We're taking a conservative view approximately 3 months ago, but we were updating today that we have been able to secure sales agreements of approximately 16 metric tons of lactoferrin for the F23 season, that it will be consuming largely our entire production. So a very good news for our investors and shareholders today. Our dairy, other dairy, again, our cream cheeses, our butters, we will continue to focus on making sure that the customer base values our provenance. And finally, new revenue streams. We have developed a very sound partnership with Mondelez in South Australia. We are in some conversations with Saputo in Victoria for some tolling arrangements of our milk into products that will continue to complement our portfolio. Next slide, please. Just to give the audience a bit of our journey this far, as I mentioned, way back in F18, our milk supplies were significantly lower than where we are today. So we have been able to really work hard with our farmers to grow total milk supplies. And I could not miss the chance to also update here that this journey has been in contrast to the total national production of dairy in Australia. So national production has been declining on the back of significant weather conditions, on the back of farmer retirements throughout the nation. and the fact that we have been able to significantly grow our milk pool has been actually quite a positive journey for our company. Again, our delivery on mozzarella production and the reliability of our factory, again, very stable now. In our F23 guidance, we are providing that we are maintaining that level of production versus F22 at 15 to 16,000 tons of product. Lactoferrin the same, we are maintaining between 16 to 19 tons of production into F23, very much aligned to F22. And as you can see, our dairy revenues moving very strongly throughout the years. We are expecting this year to be $150 to $180 million business only on dairy, where complemented by our food or meat company, we are expecting to be as close as possible to the $200 million mark for dairy sales revenues. Sorry, for total company sales revenues, apologies. Next slide, please. Again, a bit of that guidance. Milk supply, we very proud of that 155 to 175 million liters. Don't want to repeat here, but we are in our update today to our shareholders, we have reaffirmed our guidance despite a huge evolution of milk price that we have experienced over the last month. Next slide, please. I mentioned about our meat business. We also complemented our portfolio with a water portfolio that is an alkaline functional beverage business that we have in South Australia, something that we are also expecting to grow over the course of next couple coming months. And finally, I think that's the last slide. Look, we are very excited about our future, where the company is going after many years of a rebuild strategy followed by growth. We do believe that F23 will mark the beginning of sustainable earnings for our shareholders, and even in today's update to our investors, we have provided that reassurance. So very excited about our future, David. I'll leave it to you probably for questions.
Thank you, Fabrizio. Two of my favourite topics, cheese and meats. So we could talk about that all day long, and I might have to get on a plane and come over and check out the facilities. But I do have some questions that have come through. In terms of dairy recruitment, how does that work?
We effectively every year we renew contracts with our farmers, David. So by the way, we were one of the first companies in Australia providing farmers longer term contracts in terms of giving farmers a reassurance that their milk will be collected every day and they will be getting a fair paycheck for their hard work. So I you know, a combination of different levels of contracts, annual contracts. Some farmers prefer more longer term contracts.
And in terms of your selling process, do you sell 12 months in advance, 6 months, 18 months? How does that work?
Look, different contracts as well, David. We, in our domestic business, I'll give you an example. We do have a very strong relationship with Woolies nationwide. We have long-term contracts with Woolies, but pricing gets reviewed, obviously on the back of the significant volatility that exists today in overall commodity prices, which dairy is no exception. So we have effectively demand security from clients to us, where prices gets discovered sometimes in 3 months, sometimes in 6 months, sometimes in 12 months. But given the volatility, we're staying away from 12-month fixed price type of agreements. So.
And in terms of lactoferrin, which has clearly expanded and added significant revenue and profit opportunities to your business, who are your peers in the space and how do you grow more of that market share? Sure.
Look, in Australia, we have essentially 4 manufacturers of lactoferrin, Bega, Saputo, us, and Mmi, which is previously known as Freedom Foods. We are different, David, because we are because we process lactoferrin on a freeze drying type of technology, provides the protein with a much more bioactivity, which means much more pure from the point of view of that type of protein, especially into infant formula applications, right? 65% of the global market of lactoferrin today is still infant formula, even though lactoferrin is being discovered by some exciting new categories, like even pet food today. The pet food industry is using lactoferrin, right? And for example, skincare products or personal care products are using lactoferrin today. So we are expanding throughout those different channels and throughout these different product applications too.
Great, a fantastic presentation. And if there is ever a time when you would say to an investor or a potential investor, your due diligence is buy the product, try it out before making an investment decision, this is exactly the company to do that with, and I'll make sure I'll do the same. Fabrizio, thank you very much for a great presentation. We'll see you again soon.
A pleasure. Thank you, David.
Presenting last, but by no means least, is Allan Kelly from Miramar Resources, ASX code M2R. Miramar has a board with an extremely strong track record of delivering value to its shareholders, and they have assembled a land package north of Kalgoorlie, which is clearly has the potential to be developed into an exciting new gold camp. Apologies, Allan. A company sure to watch. Allan, over to you.
Great. Thanks very much, David, and thanks for the opportunity to be able to present this morning. As David said, we're very busy and we have a lot of projects on our books, and we're very active across those projects. So if we move through to the next slide, which is the disclaimer. Obviously, I've only got a limited time this morning, so I'd encourage you to look at our website, look at our various announcements and investor presentations that we put out, and by all means, email us if you have questions about what we're doing. Next slide, please. So this is a really good summary slide, and you know, the three key things I want to talk about this morning are our Gidgee project, our Glandor project, and our whale shark project. And the Gidgee project, to use a real estate analogy, is the cheapest house on the best street. We're located about 15 kilometres north of Kalgoorlie, and you can see, you know, the city of Kalgoorlie-Boulder and the famous Kalgoorlie super pit there, and our project just to the north of Kalgoorlie on the highway within the Barara shear zone. We've also got another project called Glandor, which is about 40 kilometres east of Kalgoorlie, where we're about to do some diamond drilling on the Salt Lake out there. And then I was up in Onslow last week making final preparations for an aircore program at our whale shark project, which is up near Onslow in the northwest of WA. As David said, our board is, you know, very small, but we've got a track record of finding things, building mines, and then bringing them into production and operating them successfully. And as I said, we've been very active across our projects, and I'm very proud to say that since listing back in October 2020, we've spent about an average 75% of our cash flow on active exploration, so we don't have a lot of overheads within the company. Next slide, please. This is just a corporate snapshot. We did a capital raising just recently. So after that raising, we've got about 70 million shares on issue, so a very tight structure. Part of that raising, we did an options rights issue. So now we've got some listed options, 25-cent options that are trading at about 1 cent. So our market cap at about 10 or 11 cents is about 7 million. And when you consider we've got about 3.5 million in the bank, I think that makes us very, very cheap. My experience, I'm a geologist with about 30 years, started Dore Minerals, built the Andy Well mine after discovering that, and then built the Deflector mine as well. Marion Bush, a geologist as well, and she was involved in building a mine in West Africa in Guinea. Next slide, thanks. So this is our main project, Gidgee, just north of Kalgoorlie. We've been really busy here since listing, you know, almost 2 years ago. As I said, it's a really good strategic land position, 15 kilometres north of Kalgoorlie. And the things we liked about it were it sits within this major regional structure, the Barara shear zone. To the southeast of us, you have the Barara and Golden Ridge deposits, which are being developed by Horizon. And then the structure goes through our land position up to Paddington, which was a 4 million ounce deposit. And then it keeps going further north, and that's where it's called the Bardock Shear Zone, and that goes up to Zoroastrian and Excelsior and Aphrodite. So it's a major regional mineralised structure, and it's the key thing within our ground is it's very underexplored, and I'll explain a bit more about that in a minute. The great thing is if we discover something here, there's multiple processing options nearby, including Northern Star to the south of us, Norton to the north of us, and Evolution out to the west of us. And there's also nickel sulfide potential in the Highway Ultramafic, which hosts the Scotia and Saints nickel deposits. Next slide, please. So we've been busy on the sort of middle part of the project, because that was the part of the project that was granted when we listed. And since listing, almost 2 years ago, we've made a number of discoveries at Gidgee. Marylebone was the first discovery, and one of the first holes we drilled had a couple of metres at 7 grams in bedrock. We then followed that up and we fleshed out a second parallel 1 kilometre long footprint. And you can see those pink dots and pink stars, they're plus 2 gram and plus 5 gram gold intersections. And these are all pretty much without exception, these are all in bedrock. And one of the things that we do when we do our air core drilling, we do gold analysis, but we also do a multi-element analysis. So that helps us discriminate really quickly between things that might be alluvial and things that are actually related to bedrock mineralisation. So quite often when we put out announcements, we put out a gold number and a silver number, because the silver is one of the key sort of discriminants of whether it's supergene mineralisation related to bedrock, potential bedrock source. After the Marylebone discovery, we started sort of fleshing out the air core a bit more. And then we made a second discovery at Blackfriars. That sits in an intrusion at the contact between a mafic and a sediment unit. And that's very similar to the Aphrodite deposit up to the north of us, which is about 1.7 million ounces, and also potentially pretty similar to Paddington as well. One of the key results from that was right at the northern end. We got a metre at 11 grams in the end of the hole, and that had silver and sulfides and things in the chips. So we're pretty excited about that, and we've got some more results coming in upcoming days. We kept drilling, and then we started seeing what looked like a potential third discovery. We now call that the highway trend, obviously because it crosses the highway. It was a 1 kilometre long historic auger anomaly that had never been drilled. Those yellow dots are holes that we've now drilled, but we're waiting on assays for. And we hit an intrusion within the black flag sediments. And some of those holes, notably hole 714 there right next to the highway, hit quartz veining with fresh sulfides in a porphyry intrusion. So we've now made 4 new discoveries in an area, straddled by a major highway only 15 kilometres from Kalgoorlie. And the other thing you can see on the map there is a sort of a brown line that runs up through the middle. That's a pipeline that runs from the super pit to the Gidgee roaster. So there's a lot of infrastructure here, and you wonder why this has never been explored before. If we move to the next slide, I'll try and explain it a bit more. So this is pretty much why the area hasn't been explored properly in previous times. This is a 3D sort of view of those central targets. And what you've got is this paleo channel, which is an ancient river, which is called the Gidgee Paleo Channel. And that runs across the project in a north-south direction. And all the previous drilling that had been done here was very shallow. The average depth of that channel is about 50 metres in the middle of it. But the previous drilling was only about 25 metres and it was angled. So a lot of the previous drilling that was done over this project never even got through the sort of transported sediments that sat over the prospective geology. And what we've been doing is making sure that every air core hole we drill goes through that transported material and intersects the basement. So you can see a couple of things that are really important. So the geology sort of runs off in that northwesterly direction and all the main structures. And then there's some later faults that run in the north-south direction. And we think what's happened is the channel has sort of followed those faults as the path for the channel. and then it's cut across that geology with the gold mineralisation sitting underneath the channel. The channel has stripped off the regoliths, so it makes the gold dispersion very narrow. So you have to go quite tightly spaced with your drilling. But the other key I want to get out of this is the fact that the gold targets cross-cut the channel. And that, is a pretty clear indication that the gold that we're seeing is not alluvial. If it was alluvial, you expect it to sort of run down the channel like it would in a modern river channel. So this is the key slide, I guess, for why this area hasn't been explored very well before. Okay, next slide, please. So if we look sort of step out again at the whole project, we've got about 15 kilometres of this structure called the Barara Shear Zone, and we know that we've got this channel running across it, and we know that a lot of the previous drilling has been quite shallow and ineffective. So one of the things we did earlier this year, we sort of went back to basics and did a target ranking, and we used 3 key components, that the structure, the right geology, and the evidence of any fluid or gold mineralisation. And we then ranked all the targets. And so obviously the hotter colours are the good targets, and the colder colours are the ones that are sort of less prospective. And as I said, we focused on that middle area, but now what we're starting to do is sort of look at the northern area and also the southern area. So we've got a 25,000 metre program of air core lined up. Most of that will be at Barara North. We're waiting on assays from the stuff at Blackfriars and Highway. And we've also got quite a few nickel sulfide targets within the project as well. And then depending on how the air core drilling goes, we'll then follow that up with deeper RC and diamond drilling to see if we can then find the bedrock mineralisation. Next slide, please. So an example of that is the northern targets, where we're just about to start a air core program over that main area, which we call Barara North. But before I talk about that, we just want to quickly talk about a target called Lake, which we've started doing a little bit more work on. There's some historic RC drill results there within a structural jog and a DMAG zone. There's some good hits there, sort of 2 metres at 5 grams, quite shallow. And directly along strike to the south of that is a little shaft and some historic workings and about a 20,000 ounce gold resource called Gidgee Dam. So it's obviously in a mineralised structure. There's been no drilling here since the late 1990s. And we're just going through heritage approvals now. And then once we get those approvals, we'll get out there with an RC rig and see if we can test that down dip and along strike and flesh it out into something more significant. One of the main programs we've got going during August is 200 air core holes along the 4 kilometre long Barara North target. You can see the green and purple there. The green are mafic rocks and the purple are ultramafic rocks. And that's the same unit that hosts the nickel sulfide mineralisation at Scotia and Aurochs Saints deposit. It's got a lot of lake cover, but it's very shallow. It's not like the paleo channel to the south. And so the previous drilling there, you can see the little black dots. A lot of them are very shallow. So that upcoming program is about 12,000 metres. It'll take probably about 3 or 4 weeks to complete. And then we expect to see those results probably in about October, November, depending on lab turnaround. Next slide, please. If we jump down to the southern end of the project, there's 2 really interesting targets there. That top picture is a thing called the jog. There's a big dilational jog in the Barara Shear Zone, and dilational jogs are key targets for gold geologists. And probably the most recent example of that is the Gruya deposit that Gold Road discovered out in the Yamana belt. So this dilational jog that we see destruction of the magnetic signature within the mafic and ultramafic rocks above it, which lends us to think that there's alteration and potentially mineralisation there. And then when we did a look at the gravity data, we found a dense body about 150 metres deep below the shear zone. So we're planning to do a diamond hole there once we get some approvals. We've also got another target called 8 Mile, which is right on the southern boundary of the project, right up against Northern Star. Northern Star have got a deposit called Runway, which is about 300,000 ounces on our southern boundary. But recently they've been doing some deeper drilling, and we think the rumour is that they've made a deeper discovery underneath Runway that's pretty significant. So we did an IP survey right on our tenement boundary to see what's going on, and came up with a really strong IP anomaly, which is, can be generated by mineralisation. That's about 400 metres below the surface. So we're looking at doing a diamond hole once we can find out a bit more about what's going on the other side of the boundary. Next slide, please. This is our second project. This is Glandor. It sits out about 40 kilometres east of Kalgoorlie. It's mostly covered by salt lake, and you can see the photo there of our air core drilling that we did last year. It's a salt lake, but it's not, it's a good salt lake as far as salt lakes go. It's got quite a lot of sort of vegetation cover. So it's not actually that difficult to get around, even in sort of, just four-wheel drive vehicles. But we've outlined a very large gold footprint on the lake, about 4-5 kilometres long. And there's a target called Glandor East, which I'll talk a bit more about in a minute, where there's some high-grade historic diamond results. The key is the location there. It's in a great location about 3 or 4 kilometres north of where Black Cat are going to build a mill at Majestic. And we've also got the Silver Lake mill a bit further south of that. And then also we're only about 40 kilometres from Kalgoorlie. So if we find something on this project, then there's lots of opportunities to be able to exploit it. Next slide, please. So this just focuses in on that Glandor East target, which we've been aching to get to since we listed, but have been struggling to get a lake diamond rig. We've finally got a lake diamond rig organised, and we're going to be out there within the next couple of weeks. And basically the simple geology here is you've got a contact between a granite and a mafic unit, and there's a number of these sort of west dipping quartz veins that sort of cross-cut that contact. And we believe that they've got a northeasterly strike. And if that's the case, they haven't been tested properly along strike to the northeast or to the southwest. And they have only been drilled down to about 100 metres. So very shallow. And you can see some really nice results there, including 4 metres at 44 grams at only about 60 or 70 metres below surface. So our plan is to get out there and do some holes to test the down dip and along strike potential of these high grade results, and then see if we can quite quickly work up a high grade discovery there on the lake that we could then, potentially develop with some of the nearby people out there. Next slide, please. So now getting completely away from the goldfields and heading up to the northwest. This is our whale shark project. It's about 40 kilometres east of Onslow. It's only about 10 kilometres from the coast, and it's Proterozoic rocks sitting under about 50 to 100 metres of Carnarvon Basin sediments. This is a magnetic image, and it shows you a big folded BIF complex that's been intruded by Proterozoic granite. And it's a similar geology to what you see around Mount Isa. And the target here is an Ernest Henry, so an IOCG style deposit. And what we've done so far is we did some Mmi sampling, which is a special type of soil sampling that can see through cover. And with that Mmi sampling, we outlined some really nice large copper, uranium, rare earth, moly, tungsten anomalies. And you can see them listed there, target A and target B. They sit on the edge of the granite. We're doing some gravity at the moment to just see if there's any indication of dense hematite bodies, which is another signature of IOCG mineralisation. And in August, we'll be getting an air core rig, and we'll just be drilling sort of pattern air core drilling over those two targets to see if we can see any geochemical anomalism at the interface between the Carnarvon Basin sediments and the basement. So we're looking, as I said, we're looking for like an IOCG, an Ernest Henry style deposit. And the great thing here is that we're only dealing with about 100 metres of cover, not like South Australia where you have to drill under sort of 400 or 500 metres of cover. Next slide, please. Our final project that I'll just talk very quickly about is our Bengal nickel copper projects up again in the northwest. They sit in between the Pilbara and the Yilgarn. And the basic model here is we're looking at these Proterozoic age dolerite sills within a sedimentary basin there. And this is a map that Geoscience Australia put together in 2016, where they looked at nickel sulfide potential across the whole of Australia. And this is the map that led Chalice to make the discovery down at Julimar. So I've been looking at this area for quite a few years. And when I realised that that there was a lot of similarities there between Julimar and Bangamore. We took a significant land position here. So we've got about 8 or 9 exploration licenses. A couple of those are granted, the rest are application. And we're looking to do some geochem work up here, probably after the whale shark drilling. Next slide, please. So just to summarise all that, what I've done here is I've put all the projects and basically put the stage of exploration for each of those. And you can see that the sort of most advanced targets are Marylebone and some of the targets at Gidgee, and also the Glandor East target at Glandor, where we're going to be doing diamond drilling. And then at Gidgee, we've got a whole heap of other targets that we're sort of moving up the pipeline, so to speak, from air core drilling to infill air core and into RC drilling. Similarly at Glandor. And then you can see the earlier stage targets, things like Randalls and Langwell, where we've sampled some pegmatites, and then our ICG targets at Whale Shark, and then the earlier stage stuff up in the Bangamore. So final slide, next please. So just in summary, we've been really busy since listing. We've been working to uncover what we think is a potential new gold camp at Gidgee. We've got high-grade diamond results and a very large gold footprint at Glandor that we're going to be working to follow up as well. We've got some really nice large ICG targets at Whale Shark that we're going to be doing our first drilling in the next few weeks. And we've also, first mover status in the Bangamore. We've had a number of people follow us in there on the back of the same sort of model. Importantly, for an exploration company, we're well funded and we're very active. We're out on the ground and we produce regular news flow from active exploration across all our projects. And the board, has found things and built things. So we've got that experience to be able to recognise opportunities. And probably most importantly, from a shareholder's point of view, there's a lot of value upside with exploration success. Our EV around about 3 million, I think, is really undervalues what the projects that we have at the moment. So thanks for the opportunity to present, and I look forward to talking to people about our projects in the future.
Thanks, Allan. A great presentation, Miramar Resources. I just wanted to highlight something for people who may not follow resources companies or exploration companies particularly. If you go and talk to the big funds and the institutions and you ask them what are the key things they look for in a company, it's always the people. They start with the people. What have the people delivered? What have the people achieved? And have the people driven value for shareholders in the past? And clearly, Miramar is a company with a board and a capability that have done that in the past. So hats off to you, Allan, and the rest of the board. And clearly, we're watching with much interest to the achievements that you no doubt will make in the future. But I asked this question a bit earlier. How do you get your hands on something so prospective, so close to a known mining town in terms of Kalgoorlie? And how does the technology help you unlock that ore body that is sitting there that the old timers have walked straight over or may have drilled close to? How do you get it? And how's technology help you get so much value out of it?
Yeah, that's a great question, and Gidgee is a real example of that. It's all in the timing. So the history of the Gidgee project, it was part of the larger Paddington project at the time that Paddington was discovered. But Paddington was basically outcropping and it had little shafts and workings across it. So they made the discovery there in 82 and then that went into production in 85. But I guess the part of their project which we now have was a bit far from the mill, it was a bit deeper, a bit harder. So it sort of fell off the thinking of the team. And in fact, it was owned by KCGM later on. So it was sort of at the outskirts of the KCGM land package around the super pit in Kalgoorlie. So I sort of say it was in this like no man's land in the middle between two operations. And it was just a bit deeper and a bit harder than exploring the stuff that you have right under your nose, so to speak. And the key was that the fact that you've got this paleo channel running across it, plus you've got sort of outside of that paleo channel, you've still got probably 20 to 30 metres of cover. So it's just that little bit harder than some of the easier targets right next to the mine. And it all depends, who's running the programs at the time and what the focus is and what the budget is. So I guess that's the history of why it hadn't been drilled properly. How we came across it was actually one of my old Dore geologist was sitting looking at the tenement website one morning. It was vacant ground. And he said it was vacant ground for about 2 hours and he couldn't believe it. And he just pegged it without even thinking, just because of where it was. And then I met up with him a couple of years ago and he said, oh, how about we do a deal on it? And that was it. So I sort of couldn't believe that you could have a land package that close to Kalgoorlie that was unexplored. And if you just looked at the historical drilling over the top of it, it looked like it had been well drilled. But a lot of those were only auger holes and they were only 2 meters deep. So once you strip those holes out, and then once you knew that the cover depth was, say, 40 meters, and then a lot of the holes were only 20 meters and they were angled, as soon as you pull them out, then you ended up with a completely blank canvas almost. So we got really excited about that and thought that, you know, it had the potential, especially because it's on that major structure and it's got the same geology, there was potential there to find something fairly decent. And we haven't been very smart. We've just gone out with air core drilling, systematic sort of pattern air core drilling. And every time we've done that, we've come up with really good results. So the trick now for us is to turn that air core drilling into bedrock intersections with RC. So that's the challenge. And we still don't know where the best bits of the project are yet. You know, that's why we're drilling Barara North as well. So it's really exciting. And, you know, and Glandor could be just as good.
And you mentioned drilling techniques and geotech and soil techniques. Now, they've advanced so much in the last even 10 years that the work that KCGM and the others were doing historically, you know, it's almost a blank sheet of paper, but, you know, you've got a greater idea of targets, but the technology has advanced so much that you can do so much more.
Yeah, you know, things like geophysics, we've done, I didn't talk about it, but we've done geophysics using like drones and little sort of remote control helicopters and things that weren't around 10 years ago. And these things can fly lower and slower than a helicopter can or a manned, you know, light aircraft, especially when you're flying next to roads and highways and infrastructure. So just the simple fact that you can get a guy with a little remote control helicopter and fly a mag survey, and you can fly it really close to the ground, and you can fly very slow and get really, really good data. You couldn't do that probably 5 years ago. So yeah, it's fantastic to be in that location and simply get out there and get good results every time we drill.
Now, talking of exploration into development, into production, you are known for developing the Andy Well project into a significant mining operation. In terms of discoveries and the exploration, any similarities?
I think Glandor East actually looks more like Andy Well because it's sort of narrow, high-grade veins. So that's why we're really, you know, we've been champing at the bit to get out to Glandor East. Gidgee is probably more larger scale than Andy Well. It's going to be a bit more challenging to make discovery there because of that cover. But, you know, all gold deposits are similar and they're all different, you know, like we've got really good geology, we've got structures. A lot of the time it's just following up, joining the dots and following up the air core drilling and then getting to deeper drilling. We're still at the very early stages at Gidgee. We haven't really even worked out what's going on at the north and south yet. I'd say the more likelihood of a quicker resource and discovery is probably Glandor East. And hopefully, you know, we'll know what that looks like pretty quickly in September.
And are the majors who are all around you, is what you're doing piquing their interest?
Yeah, it is, especially down south at the 8 Mile runway area on the tenement boundary there. So KCGM had, you know, drilled out a resource there back in 2013. And then nothing had been done. And then obviously Northern Star took over Saracen and KCGM. So they've been a lot more active and they were drilling literally right up to our tenement boundary. So, you know, we drilled a couple of diamond holes there and we hit the same geology, but we didn't get mineralisation in that runway porphyry that they had. But if they've made this new discovery right on our tenement boundary there, the deeper discovery, then it's very likely that goes on to our ground. So I'm sure they'll be watching very keenly when we finally drill that, because, you know, if it's all one ore body there, then it'd be pretty significant.
Allan, a great presentation, a company sure to watch. I'd urge those watching today to whack it on your watch list and keep an eye on Miramar Resources, stock code M2R. A board and management have delivered in the past, a great location, a big work program ahead and well funded. Allan, all the best.
Great. Thanks very much, David.
Well, that brings to a close our Hidden Gems webinar series for today. Thanks to Share Cafe for hosting the event, for each and every one of you for participating, asking such insightful questions. Now, the title is Hidden Gems webinar, and I think it's fair to say today 3 absolute hidden gems were uncovered. Put them on the watch list, keep an eye on them, follow the news flow and enjoy following them as they progress their businesses over the next 3 to 6 months. Thanks everyone for your time and have a fantastic weekend.